So, the lady from Zoom has told us that recording is in progress, and let me share my screen. So this talk is the principles of lean portfolio management for business agility. So, and let's just get straight into it, and let's have a chat. I'd like to hear from you. What does this term mean? So put something into the chat window. What is this concept or the idea? If you hear the word lean portfolio management, what springs to mind, please? So throw something in the chat. Efficient. Efficiency. At the moment, I feel fear. Ooh, removal of waste, efficient and effective, lightweight governance of strategic level work, better investment decisions because we're adopting portfolio performance and hopefully adapting, organizing everything around the flow, managing portfolio of projects, initiatives in a lean way, collection of yet unprioritized initiatives to be approved in, oh, wow, in order to become projects and products, able to move more critical to the top, prioritize and deliver business value. Why would we want to do that? Prioritization and value focus in projects in the portfolio. Some good solid ideas here. And yeah, I hope that we're going to be able to build on these and explore. So first of all, let me just stop sharing for a moment or three. There it is. I'm Shane Hasty. My day job is I'm the Director of Community Development for ICAgile. And what ICAgile has recently launched a new certification around lean portfolio management. And the way we build our certifications is we go out to the community and we ask expert practitioners to help us, to tell us what are the competencies, what are the pieces of knowledge that people need to have and the competencies they need to build to become proficient in the various disciplines. And when we went out to practitioners to talk about lean portfolio management, one of the things that came through pretty quickly was that there was a whole lot of uncertainty and there was not a lot of clarity, particularly around the underlying fundamentals. So as part of the work that we did, we took the ideas that these expert practitioners were putting together and we came up with a set of foundational principles for lean portfolio management. And that's what this talk is about. And the agenda for today is we'll define what we mean by lean portfolio management. Then I'm going to go through the 9 principles that we have. And after that, I'm going to ask for your thoughts. And then I'm going to give one example of an organization that in my own experience has achieved this and the way they worked and what they did. We'll talk about some anti-patterns, and depending on how our time goes, we'll have some more space and time for conversation, and then we'll wrap it up. So that's the plan. We'll see, we'll adapt the plan to what the reality is, but that's kind of where I hope to go over the next 50 minutes. So first of all, what is it? This is not the definition of what it is, but it's a very, very important foundation. It enables rapid learning, adaptation, and responsive change in organizations And this is not about IT products. This is about the organization as a whole, the portfolio of initiatives, projects, programs, work that is being done, the value streams. And a lot of the ideas that came up in the chat definitely are pointing us towards this. Our definition, it provides a mechanism for organizations to fund and manage the flow of initiatives and activities across the whole enterprise, maximizing value delivered to customers and other stakeholders. This facilitates an alignment of work to the organization's overall strategy and enables prioritization of the most important work while limiting work in progress and respecting the team's capacity to deliver. Managing work in progress. This domain draws on lean thinking, system thinking, agile development, and business agility to achieve business goals and rapidly adapt to changing circumstances. So this is the stake in the ground that ICAgile has put there and said, this is our definition of lean portfolio management, to set that up and make it freely available to the world. And one of the things that we do with these learning outcomes is we release them as Creative Commons assets. That's a very, very deliberate part of our values and our mission, is making these things available to the world, not just to our member organizations. And we believe that if we make these things available, then it will advance the state of agility in general and improve the lot if organizations take these ideas on board. So there's the definition, but what did we come up with the principles? And we have 9 principles that we have identified, and I'm going to go through them. And I will point you afterwards at the end of the deck, and I'm going to make the deck available. I will post a link to a white paper into the meetup group where you can download and you can see this full set of principles with their full definition, and what we mean by it. And the recording will be part of the archive of the festival as well. So our first principle, the shift to customer centricity within a larger context. And that larger context is important to us. The image that you see there is the Business Agility Institute focus or set of domains of business agility, which puts the customer firmly at the center. And that's really important. But it's customer centricity, not customer exclusivity. And one of the things that we look at is that wider domain. So we empathize and serve the customer in a larger social and environmental context. Everyone in the organization needs a clear line of sight to the customer, the organization's vision, and this larger context. And this is about being good social citizens as well. It goes beyond just, now it's going away beyond the shareholder capitalism of the 1980s to stakeholder capitalism, to societal good as well as customer outcomes. And we fundamentally believe, and we've seen it, that organizations that take this focus do actually end up doing better in the financial metrics as well. Our second principle is communicate an adaptive strategy with transparency. The organizations today need a strategy that supports blah, 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 fumble, that supports their vision, their true north to effectively respond to changing environments. They recognize that the path forward is fundamentally unseeable, but they know where they're going. The feedback, the learning, and the adaptation of core competencies for success in the 21st century. Adaptive strategy embodies the flexible approach and this response to changing environments. An effective adaptive strategy is articulated and communicated across the whole organization to enable local decision-making that aligns with and is constrained by the organization's goals. So empowering the people at the edge, but giving them those clear guidelines and guardrails to work within. Align around common goals and how they might change. This true north that guides strategy is conveyed as a set of business outcomes spaced across different time horizons. The goals are expressed and communicated in clear, measurable terms to make the strategy implementable. Every area of the organization understands where and how they contribute to the overall mosaic that delivers on these business outcomes. Feedback loops ensure that the goals and outcomes adapt to meet the evolving needs of the organization, and these changes are communicated transparently and clearly. Define, prioritize, and deliver business value frequently. Business value needs to be articulated in clear language, using those clear agreed upon metrics to make work prioritization clear and straightforward at any level. Depending on the scope of control, work is delivered in the smallest increments possible, as frequently as possible, to enable rapid feedback, learning, and adaptation. The entire organization is attuned to feedback, listening for both the weak signals and the louder messages. Feedback mechanisms are built into every aspect of delivery and are used to learn and adapt in these iterative cycles. Structure and value streams. And I will confess, here is the shameless self-promotion. This is the cover of Evan Laybourne's and my book, #No Projects, Moving to a Culture of Continuous Value. And traditional silo-based organization structures impede the flow of value through handoffs and dependencies. Lean portfolio management is only truly effective when the people responsible for delivering value have end-to-end control of all of the steps in the value chain. This requires rethinking the borders and structures of organizations around identifying and delivering value rather than the specializations of skills and competencies. Cross-functional, collaborative, stable teams responsible for achieving business outcomes, and they have the skill and knowledge they need to do so. These teams benefit the organization by improving coordination, simplifying communication, and sharing expertise to solve business problems. Take accountability for outcomes over outputs. Value streams enable teams to take ownership and accountability for delivering value to their customers, supporting organizational outcomes. Outcomes are achieved when work is done that provides value for customers and other stakeholders in the value chain. Value teams are tasked with achieving outcomes and empowered to figure out the best way to achieve them within realistic constraints. Outcomes are the primary focus. Outcomes are measured only as steps towards achieving the outcomes. And generally, the outputs are private to the team. Optimize flow and reduce waste across the whole system. Systems thinking is a core competency for effective lean portfolio management. It's the big picture understanding about how the different value streams converge to achieve the organization goals. Identifying and minimizing dependencies across value streams to enable prioritization and adaptation. Waste should be reduced or eliminated wherever it occurs in the system. Adaptivity to changing needs and shift in context requires the ability to look across the whole portfolio and shift investments if necessary. This adaptation can happen at any level in the organization, from the backlog of a single product to the value streams themselves needed to achieve the organization's goals. And we're comfortable to make these shifts as we learn. And we manage that limiting whip, which we'll talk about soon. We shorten the planning and funding cycles. Effective lean portfolio management requires shorter funding and planning cycles, moving away from annual planning and long-term funding to quarterly or more frequent planning. Keep the bank open rather than allocating funds once a year, to allow responsive funding for new opportunities and goals as they emerge. Fund value streams rather than projects, and shift from permission-based governance to empowered decision-making with frequent feedback and value-driven reporting. Funding enables innovation when organizations shift from pure cost-based budgeting to value-based and begin measuring progress towards outcome. The question of what will it cost and what value will we get is central to this shift. Balance capacity and demand. Limit WIP, limit work in progress at every level of the portfolio. The whole organization has a finite limit to how much can be delivered and how much funding is available in a time frame. The same applies to every value stream. Don't overload the system with a top-down push of work. Implement a pull-based flow where teams pull from a prioritized funnel of work. Ruthless prioritization ensures that the highest value work is done first. Take an economic viewpoint, maximize value while managing cost. So those are the 9 fundamental principles, foundational principles of lean portfolio management as ICAgile sees them. What I'd like to do now, stop sharing, is hear from you. How does this resonate? And let's just feel free, turn on your video, turn on your audio. What do you think?
There is one thing that really struck me very well. The thing about shorten the planning and funding cycles, right? So which I see is very crucial. Many organizations, again, we always tell, right? So the engineering teams are forced to move into agile ways of working. However, the further up, be it the so-called project managers and program managers and directors and VPs and all of them, right? Anybody further up remain the older way they are. Yeah. Now we have 2 challenges. Challenge number 1, transitioning from whatever the older ways of doing things to agile ways of doing things, which we have been talking about since last 20 years. That is one first challenge, which is still existing, I would say. On top of that, now in the last 18 months, the focus towards hybrid working and things like that, right? So combining these 2, I think what you are talking about, shortening the portfolio, the planning and funding cycles is so relevant. So you said very decently, quarterly or less. I would say, it is even more, right? Yeah. You have to be even more responsive about it.
Yeah. Well, we've come through 18 months of absolute disruption. But if we think back to the end of 2019, there would have been years of effort coming up with budgets and plans for 2020.
Yeah.
On the 9th of March, 2020, those budgets and plans were destroyed.
Yeah.
And organizations managed to respond. What was really amazing is that there was typically within 3 weeks, organizations had pivoted. It was stressful, and I think of the absolute phenomenal efforts, heroic efforts of particularly people in IT support and infrastructure and so forth to enable it to happen. But it did happen. So we know that it can be done. So
yeah.
Thank you, Raj.
Yeah.
Carol, you have your hand up.
Yeah. So hi, Shane. So the principles that we have discussed, the ones that I feel resonate to the way we are working these days, is the second principle that we spoke about in terms of alignment of the strategy and having that transparency, which is so very important. And the third one, which you spoke about, was the goals that are likely to change, the common goals that are likely to change. Because a number of times we have seen in the past that the goals and the strategies are not aligned or transparent, because they are the ones which are going to trickle down. And I feel it's a top-down approach when we talk about the goals and how the OKRs of the teams will also be affected. And if they are not transparent or communicated clearly from top to the down, we are not going to get the result that we are looking for.
Yeah.
And this will in turn come back to the first principle that you spoke about, the customer centricity, because that's also something that will be missed because our goals, our strategies are not aligned and are not open to change.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are principles. They are hard, they're simple to define and hard to apply for many organizations. This is, I'm not pretending that this is going to be a magic wand solution that we can take this and every executive is going to read these and yes, we will magically align. No, this is hard work. And these are fundamental shifts that we're asking organizations to make. But if we're going to become agile businesses, truly adaptive, then these are the types of shift that we absolutely do have to make.
Yeah, but Shane, I also have one question regarding the focus on outcomes versus outputs on the accountability. And that is something that I believe is very important. But as we move from the top to the down, like towards the teams, it takes a lot of time to see those outcomes.
Yeah, and they need to be, what's really important there is we have to work out and figure out how we get that alignment. And structures like OKRs are good for this, but they can also be used extremely badly. And we'll talk shortly about some of the anti-patterns. Louise, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just having a look at the 9 principles. I think the interesting one for me is actually principle 2, because all the other ones I can kind of recognize as having popped up with other stuff. But this adaptive strategy with transparency, I think that's quite interesting because, I look at my organization, we're doing a lot around some of those, a lot around the other things, but that one, I'm not sure that we are. So that's interesting.
I have a quick question out of curiosity as well.
Yes,
So was this created after the pandemic started, sometime recently, these 9 principles, or?
Yeah, we released the learning outcomes last month.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
We worked with the panel who put it together, the committee of experts. They did the work over the last 3 or 4 months.
Very good. Perfect. And then I would also not talk about one, again, I don't know whether it is indirectly mentioned in any of these principles, but then, we speak about outcomes and all of that, I think one of the further deeper level aspect to look at is working with some leading indicators, right? Times we only think of outcomes, but are we going to measure only that in a very later fashion or kind of thing? But are we going to start looking at it small things which will continuously indicate us to leading towards that particular outcome on a very regular basis, very frequent basis?
Yep.
So that's something that we have to focus on, I would say.
Yeah. So those are often output measures that are indicative. And as I said, we certainly do measure them, but they are private to the team. And also these will often form the weak signals that we touched upon. So it's not listening just for the loud things. It's what are the rumors? What are the hints that we're hearing that we should be holding our ear to the ground for as an organization? And again, not an easy thing, but really, really important. So thank you for that conversation, folks. Just being conscious of time and hoping to get an opportunity for more conversation shortly. This is one example of one organization where I have seen this actually done, and it was quite a while back. This is an image from a room that was on the top floor of New Zealand Post House in Wellington. Unfortunately, New Zealand Post House was severely impacted by an earthquake, so the sorting room, as it's called, is no longer there. Paul Reed was the chief executive at the time, and he brought this in. But the idea is this is an Obaya room, a transparent space for the whole organization. And if you look, these images represent the four walls of the room. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner the tall chairs and the edge of a table. There was a table in there that you really stood up around, or you had these bar stool type chairs that you sat on. And there were a number of protocols related to this. One of the protocols was the room was open and available to anyone in the organization could come in and have a look at any time. All of the work, all of the major initiatives and pieces of work that were going on were up on the walls, represented by those different post-it notes. The different colored post-it notes had meaning, and there was some of it was time bound. You could see projection out across multiple quarters, so in this case 2 years, knowing that things are going to change, and they were on post-it notes because they moved around a lot. Then another protocol, once a week the executive team would get together in this room, and they never had more than 2 topics. And that's what you see over there on the top left, those 2 topics, and that image of the body with the lungs and diaphragms. That image of the body with the lungs and diaphragm, these were the organization health, and they would look at each aspect, and this would be a part of that conversation, and never more than 2 topics at a time. And the other protocol, and this is the picture on the back of the door on the bottom right, is the elephant in the room. If during a conversation that's going on in this room, somebody noticed that there is a topic we are avoiding, everybody agreed that you could write it down, stick it on the elephant, and they would not leave the room until the elephant topics had been exposed and discussed. Now, this was an executive team that built a culture of great safety and transparency. Yes, obviously there were a few initiatives sometimes that were needed to be kept somewhat confidential, and you might see a code name for one or two things, but the vast majority of the items that were on there, that was just, this is the work that the organization is doing, and they were constantly looking at how do we manage the work in progress, what are we stopping, and every time we start something new, what are we choosing not to do because of that? And those conversations, that culture was deeply embedded, and it extended through the whole organization. So that is, this is a case study that's actually in Evans in my book. And it's one example that I have seen where this stuff was made real. And this was before, way before we published the learning outcomes here. Right. Hashari, oh, I'm mangling your name, forgive me.
Call me Dashmi, Shane. So this is fantastic, right? What we've seen, visual boards have always been very effective, irrespective of the scale of the projects. Just curious to know, has there been any hybrid adaptations to this? How are teams in general managing in the new hybrid world?
I've seen Abaya rooms or Abaya spaces made in Mural and Miro, for instance. And at ICAgile, we have one. We've got a combination of Jira and Mural, and that works for us. It's not perfect, and there are more dedicated tools for Abaya spaces that exist out there. I have not personally used them, but I do know that they exist.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
At this point, we've got a bit of time left. Yes, we have. I want to throw it open to you. What have you seen? What are some examples of these types of principles in play at real-world organizations? Jenny.
Hi, Shane. Hi, everyone. I think in terms of these principles being implemented in an organization that's never used them before, I'm currently in the process of taking a multi-billion-dollar organization through their first iteration of this. It doesn't look anything as pretty as what you have presented.
It won't.
It's still annual planning, but we have done the annual plan for the annual budget around the principles of, we've designed a prioritization framework for the entire organization to use to create a single portfolio backlog, which we can then put into a Kanban. We've put in the principles of, you've now got a baseline where you can trade off. If someone brings something in more important in, you can have that conversation to manage the capacity and demand. We haven't yet got to the more frequent funding, but that's one of our next steps. But it's comforting and validating to know that even though I'm suffering extreme PTSD right now from doing this for the first time ever, that we are still aligned to the principles, and we may actually get to the utopia one day. But for anyone else out there, you can actually do this in multi-billion-dollar organizations if you start small and you make these small changes. A big leap for us today, for us this week, is we've taken it from Excel into Jira, which sounds small, but it's the first time there's ever been a single enterprise-wide prioritized cross-functional backlog ever.
That's wow.
I know it sounds so small, but it's so validating to see that actually everything that we do, and when you're stuck in the weeds, you put it back up to the 9 principles, you're following all of this, you're getting that visibility, you're monitoring that portfolio, you're adapting when things come in, and you're managing that capacity and demand. So thank you for that. I feel much better now.
Thank you. Renee.
Yes, it's sorry, similar to me. So with my previous company, when we had a new product for customers, we started with 1 week of actually brainstorming, collecting everything in one room, even with the customers, putting up Post-its and A4 paper sheets or bigger paper sheets, and created something like a prototype, so that the customer exactly knew what was our idea, even with his input. So not like it's our idea, but it's our common idea with the customer, so that they can say, no, actually we don't want this. And it was quite nice because we only took 1 week to have the first draft for something. So he spent like, or they spent like 1 week of money to say, no, it's not good, and not like we spent 3 years of money and now you give us something which is of no value to us. And this was quite actually what you're describing now.
That's great. These practices are definitely out there, and there are organizations that are doing this and achieving great outcomes. So again, moving forward, some anti-patterns, the common mistakes we have seen, and we all make mistakes, and we're all going to make these mistakes over and over again. But some examples, some things we've seen where it really gets in the way. Adopt OKRs and then use them as a performance management framework. One of the most common mistakes. Not shifting to value streams, trying to lay LPM over a hierarchical organization is going to be a nightmare, because all of the handoffs and the silo behavior is going to get mashed up with this. Annual budgeting is a bottleneck. Trying to adopt exactly what another organization has done without adapting it to your own context. Not taking the time to really understand and learn what your value streams really are. The reorganization too often and too early and too frequently. It's actually worth taking some time to think about what are those most effective value streams. The constant shifting of people with no clear understanding of capacity. The thinking of mechanistic thinking. Give me a programming unit. Don't think about the person who is the programmer. The hidden work, the secret agendas, the portfolio objectives getting overridden by the local political flavor of the month. The lip service with no transparency around the real blockers or impediments. The gaps in the strategic vision or clarity. Start with get that vision, find that true north. What they're calling as an outcome is actually an output. Get hard and measure the real outcomes. And keep the balance, get the balance right of the run, grow, transform type work in the portfolio. There's some of your work which is about just running the business as it is today. There's some that needs to be about how do we grow, and there's some that is about how do we change the organization for the future. But get that balance right. And what that right balance is, I have no idea, because it's specific to your organization. So again, I'd like to throw this open. What are some of the anti-patterns that you have seen?
Sorry, Shane, just a quick question. I missed the thing that you said about OKRs as an anti-pattern. So can you please talk about that specifically?
So OKRs are a really useful framework. And if they are adopted as a performance management framework and we're using them against the individuals in the organization, they destroy the intent. So it's easy. They're one of those simple concepts that, when done badly, can cause harm.
Perfect. Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Jenny.
I think an anti-pattern that I've seen a lot is people adopt lean and agile and misinterpret the welcome changing requirements principle. And one of the things we really need to consider is that it is great to pivot, but it comes with a cost. And that impact and cost analysis, not just on time, not just on dollars, but on team health, on the quality of the solution, on the impact on the customer, all that sort of stuff, that is typically not considered when you implement these things, because everyone's like, oh, we're agile now, so we should just be able to pivot on a dime. And it's really critical to do that impact analysis to make sure that it is actually worth making that pivot and making that change.
Yeah. Manage that organization whip and reduce waste. And sometimes too much churn is waste. Thank you. Sridhar Sharini. I'm mangling your name. Forgive me.
You got it almost there, right? So one of the common things that I've noticed is whenever we talk about agile, organizations usually jump into implementing agile teams in the engineering unit. Yeah. And the other thing is there's a push to drive faster, quicker into the market, and it's all Apache work. And whereas the funding and the capacity models are not studied, there's not been any changes made on it. Funding is still annual, but then teams are expected to adapt to changing priorities, which has been a key challenge. Yeah, so probably that's one thing which I'm looking for insights and to learn as to how organizations are actually adapting and, implementing the new ways of working to handle this challenge.
That's a whole nother talk, but there's a lot out there. I am going to do a bit of a shameless self-promotion. Have a look at our book, and there's the link at the end for that, because we do talk about here are some practical ideas and ways to adopt it. So thank you for that. Alberto.
Hello, good morning. Greetings here from Nigeria.
Yeah.
So in follow-up to what Jenny said earlier, welcoming change. I don't know, if when you consider a scenario where a service organization, okay, it's has already aligned with the customer to say, this is what we are taking into a sprint, and you are measured or in quotes, your invoice is as per agreed. You deliver what's in the sprint, you get paid and all that, because man hours and capacity and all that has been factored in. And there comes in quotes, a brutal PO that says, this is an emergency from the business, you need to get it done, and done within the sprint, not minding the capacity that has already been factored in ab initio from sprint planning. How do you do? And this, I'm speaking with the experience from this part of the world where agile adoption is actually growing. So people just bring that waterfall mentality into the project and say, yes, you are agile. They said you can, welcome, customer requirement. Do it.
Yeah, we're going to hit you with the agile stick.
How do you approach that at gunpoint, literally?
Yeah, this is where, if we're talking about agile at the team level, this is where the role of the product owner, if we're using Scrum as the model, the role of the product owner, the empowered person who can truly say, okay, what is the priority? What happens here? If this truly is a more important piece of business priority than what we've got in the backlog, then we will cancel the sprint and start again, or de-scope the work in the sprint, and there's a clear trade-off conversation. It's got to be in that empowered conversation, not just we're buckling to the unfair pressure. And again, there's a whole new story and a whole new talk there. I will point you to a YouTube video. Product ownership as a team sport is one that I've done a few times, so maybe look for that.
Yeah,
Andre.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Andre?
Okay, thank you, Shane. For me, the burning question in my head is from the dude before me. They talk about the OKR, objective key result, and it is an anti-pattern to dig down to individual OKR, and but then in my head the burning question is then how we evaluate the individual, like maybe she or he need improvement, or yeah, something that is not really in a good standard. And what is it that a good practice maybe that we can approach?
This is where tools like 360-degree reviews come into play, because using OKRs to assess individuals is unfair. But there are other tools, and one of the first things that we would point to is how do we improve the system? If somebody is not performing, Edward Deming, way back in the 1950s and 60s, said 95% of an individual's performance is the system that they work within, not the work that they are doing. So we start with a systems thinking perspective and we explore that. And then we can use tools like 360-degree reviews and so forth that do give that feedback. But we keep that distinctly separate from the OKR, which is about organizational outcome, not about individual. So we haven't got time at this point to go deeper into that, but don't mix the two, please. All right, so just another couple of things to wrap up. This is a quote from Ahmed Sidki, one of the founders of ICAgile. The journey to business agility is a grind, driven by an identity, and it requires persistent effort over a long period of time and a growth mindset, and it has no shortcuts. Jenny, you are in a multi-billion-dollar corporation. You are going to take years to make these transitions.
Yep.
It's not something that's going to happen quickly. It's going to be hard yards, hard yakka. And this is the reality. And anyone who tells us otherwise is a snake oil salesman. They're lying in their teeth. So just to take this further, just a reminder that ICAgile has launched a set of learning outcomes for lean portfolio management, and we're anticipating before the end of the year that there will be at least 2 member organizations offering training in the lean portfolio management certification. But you can download the learning outcomes, you can download this white paper that explores these principles. They're all available. And just to wrap things up with who we are, or our true north. I said that we release all of these things as Creative Commons very deliberately because it's part of achieving our vision. Our vision is that organizations around the world enable and inspire everyone in them to create a better future for those around them. Our belief is that an organization's journey towards business agility requires shift to an empowered, human-centric culture that sparks creativity and innovation. Learning has the power to transform people, and by extension, establish this culture that enables people to create a better future for their customers, employees, partners, and more. That is that bigger societal growth. So we have 6 minutes left. Questions, conversation.
Well, you can use the 6 minutes to do a live coaching session with a very reluctant anti-lean portfolio management executive, Shane. I'm sure you can pull that off in 5 minutes. Turn them around.
No. That's a big ask. And yeah, I will put some of that information up on the meetup group, the link to the ICAgile website, and to the white paper, and to all of this. Any other questions or thoughts, folks?
I had a quick one if I can. Sorry, because I feel like I've talked too much. Are OKRs synonymous with LPM, or can you use other methods? Only because OKRs are badly abused, as we know, and they're incredibly hard to implement correctly. So are there other ways to link strategy into delivery and the portfolio other than OKRs?
I believe there are. Personally, I don't have a lot of experience using a wide variety of different approaches. I have found OKRs to be pretty useful, but they are not the only tool in the toolbox by any means. It's anything that conveys that vision and clarity down. So it's more than the tool, it's the principle of how do we convey that clarity down. OKRs are probably the most commonly used tool to achieve this at the moment. But I don't believe
but it's quite hard to change a business from outputs to outcomes using OKRs, because the key results become
the outputs. Yeah.
Yeah. So publish a strategy, done. I achieved my OKR, right?
Yeah.
So it's quite hard to change that way of thinking. So I was just wondering if you had any experience in what you can use in the interim to get them from things to value.
The beyond budgeting folks have got some really good stuff in. Beata Borges talks about it, and he gave some really good examples. I can't remember what the tool was called, but it's the tool that they use at Statoil. And that was where a lot of the beyond budgeting stuff came from. So have a look at beyond budgeting. There's some good tools in there.
I will do. Thank you.
We'll end with, please connect with me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
I hope this was a worthwhile investment of your time today.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Shane.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye.
Stay safe, Shane. Take care. See you very soon.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.